We are here at UCLA. Wow, you're tall. Can I get him in? Thanks. We're here at UCLA on the 12th of March. It's a beautiful day in Los Angeles. What is it, 83 degrees?
Yeah.
Eat your heart out. And we're going to debate the following question. This House would ban affirmative action. Ooh. On the affirmative would be Gabe, and on the negative, Joe. Let the debates begin.
All right, so before I begin, I just want everyone to, the central theme of my whole argument is that two wrongs do not make a right. So before I begin, I want to go into some definitions. I want to distinguish between what several different people that I researched, including Fessenden and Keller of the New York Times 2013, distinguish between weak affirmative action and strong affirmative action. Weak affirmative action is just merely promoting to promote equality and opportunities for all groups in society. But strong affirmative action is what's known as preferential treatment and discrimination in favor of members of underrepresented groups which have been treated unfairly in the past and at the expense of groups that have historically not been treated unfairly, in most cases Caucasians and sometimes Asians when it has to do with university admissions. So that's what, for the purpose of this brief, that's what I'm going to be attacking is strong affirmative action, not weak affirmative action.
Good.
And then just very quickly, I want to distinguish between wealth and income. Wealth is the length of time that a person or a family can maintain their lifestyle without needing extra work or extra money to support them, as opposed to someone who receives a high income. So it's possible to be wealthy without having a high income. It's possible to have a high income without being wealthy. So the problem is that because of historical tendencies in the United States, affirmative action has created an unfair advantage that many times minorities will be chosen in favor of Caucasian applicants who are equally or even more qualified just to fill out either a quota that needs to be filled out in public institutions or to try to promote diversity. Now, at the heart of this debate are African Americans and Latinos who have endured a long legacy of discrimination in the United States, and therefore we see what is called by the National Conference of State Legislation 2014 as reverse racism. That means, as I mentioned before, races and groups that have been historically favored get reverse racism, which means they just get underrepresented to compensate for that. But it's not their fault. They're not the ones that had slaves. They're not the ones that were against the minorities to begin with. So as far as how big the problem is, I'd like to point out that according to the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, affirmative action itself may very well be unconstitutional. And also, according to under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it may also be illegal. So I want to point, before I go into my solution, I want to point out that the Hoover Institution in 2014 conducted a study to see who's benefiting the most from affirmative action, and they found that while it does help minorities in many ways to achieve a better lifestyle, the majority of the minorities that are receiving these benefits are the ones that are middle and upper class, which I think goes against what it's trying to do, because while it is important to help those people who are disadvantaged, I think it's more important to help the ones that are economically at a disadvantage. So my solution is that racial affirmative action should be changed and slowly phased out, while at the same time implementing wealth-based affirmative action. Now, wealth, going back to the definition that I said, not in terms of income, but in terms of how long you can sustain your style of living or your family style of living throughout time without having to take on an extra job. So I think that while it's phased out, they should use the ranking system, because they do use rankings to determine which races get priorities. For example, it depends on state-to-state basis, but for example, African Americans first, then Hispanics, so on and so forth. I think that should be slowly phased out by giving less and less priority to the races in those rankings, and then over the next decade or so, implement the wealth-based affirmative action. Now, while the weaknesses in there may have been shown by an example in when Texas universities banned affirmative action and went. What was that time?
That's time.
I now stand open for cross-examination. Do I stand?
You stand, both stand in the middle up back there. Yes, thank you. Behind the green line, please. There we go. Go forward, please.
Forward?
Yeah.
Okay, so you did distinguish different kinds of affirmative action.
Look at your audience, not your opponent,
You did
please.
distinguish different kinds of affirmative action, but do you think that the seemingly limited current race-based affirmative action is one that is a subset to a bigger concept of affirmative action in general?
Look at your audience. Thank you.
Do you mean the one that's currently in place now, if it's part of a larger?
Do you think it's part of a bigger, do you think it's a subset of all affirmative actions in general?
I believe so, but I think that it's one that is outdated for many reasons. When it was implemented, it was right after the Civil Rights Movement, right after the 60s, and then when it was reformed by Johnson, it was still very not too long from the Civil Rights Movement. So I think that the obstacles that minorities, particularly African Americans, suffered at the time, the affirmative action that we have now, or that subset, was more relevant back then. But now, as we progress and we're becoming less and less racist and segregated,
Good, thank you. Chair will now recognize the leader of the opposition for a speech not to exceed 4 minutes in length.
Okay, so I will be negating the resolution that this House would ban affirmative action and saying that this proposition is to present that instead of banning the affirmative action, we should rather keep it and refine the current definition of the affirmative action that we have in the field of education specifically. Just to define affirmative action in my advantage, it is addressing an institutional organization to show an inclination to a group of people by any and all standards, be it race or class, and therefore it's not merely a missions policy. The problem right now, though, is definitely centered on the fact that it leads to a significant decrease in the minority application to colleges once you ban the affirmative action that you have. That has been a problem in the University of California in 1998, where banning it led to a significant decrease in the applications of minority students in Berkeley and UCLA. Also in 1996, where it was banned in Texas, it led to a decrease in African American applicants. The problem with this is that it leads to a reverse discrimination. It's a term phrased by a professor at Harvard who said that the war on discrimination is not actually over yet in the field of education, and that compared to the Caucasians who were rewarded PhDs, there were 25,000 of them, but there were only 14,000 African American PhDs who received it from America. And that affirmative action has a direct impact on the economy of America. Studies by economists Dale and Kruger showed that graduating from select universities do not increase the earning likelihood for middle-class whites, but does significantly increase, I don't know where you got that from, does increase the likelihood for Black and Hispanic students and those from less affluent backgrounds. And this does tells us that keeping the affirmative action has a more direct impact on the economy of America than it should be ban the affirmative action. The problem, again, is centered around the racial discrimination, but the secondary problem to this is that most of the jobs in the economy are taken by Caucasians. About 90% of all top jobs in the news media, 96% of all CEO positions, and 86% of all law partnerships are currently taken by the Caucasians. And the solution is to change, not to ban, but to change the encompassing alternative action to a race-blind affirmative action, and thereby including
1 minute.
Thereby including a group of people by class as well. This has been the refinement of the current affirmative action has been taking place in Texas. It's called Top 10%, where only the most qualified individuals, it still is a type of affirmative action, but it does include race and class-based standards, and thereby we're able to make a change to a different kind of affirmative action that's proposed very effective. And the potential problem, obviously, is that the more conservative states of America, such as Virginia, Kentucky, will disagree that the current affirmative action is only affecting the minority groups. However, by changing it to a class-based affirmative action, we are able to target the whites in low economic backgrounds in such states, and thereby we're able to counter a potential threat to this. And therefore, I believe that we should not ban the affirmative action,
Time.
but to change.
Okay. I now stand open for cross-examination and points of clarification.
Cross-examination.
Okay,
Good.
so you mentioned the Texas and California.
Stand close together, please. Thank you.
So you mentioned the Texas and California examples, which found, as you mentioned, found that as soon as affirmative action was abolished, they found the number of minorities decreasing their admissions. But what do you think, the fact that the studies were done right after the affirmative action was abolished, don't you think that if it was phased out slowly as I proposed, it would, instead of seeing an instant drop in minorities, just see the gradual switch over into the wealth-based affirmative action and helping those that are financially at a disadvantage rather than racial?
No, by dropping the rates of enrollment by a group of minorities in colleges, that means that there is a that there is a negative impact on the American economy, because, as I said, studies done by economists, Kruger, said that the likelihood of decreasing the wealth, I'm sorry,
Time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
1 minute is fast.
Chair will now call upon the leader of the government for a rebuttal, not to exceed 2 minutes in length,
Okay, well,
following the 4 steps of refutation.
Okay, well, I agree with a lot of things that my opponent said, but one of the things is that he emphasized, he cited the Texan example where they switched from affirmative action to the top 10% style of test scores. Well, while he said that was an effective method, I disagree with that because I believe that test scores should not be the main indicator of affirmative action, but rather it should be, as I said, wealth, because there could be many cases where somebody, regardless of race, they fall just outside the 10th percentile, yet they have been living in poverty for their whole lives, whereas someone who has not been living in poverty is very well off, gets a little, just gets into that 10th percentile. I believe that the other person should have priority based on that system. I'm gonna do that. Also, my opponent mentioned diversity of university applications, and that switching to his version of affirmative action would still have the benefits of diversifying, because it would, as he said, it would be blind to race and accept all different classes. But I believe, while I agree with the crux of that argument, I disagree with the wording of it, because I think that if we were able to implement the plan I proposed with wealth-based, I feel that race and wealth are not mutually exclusive, and they're not mutually inclusive either, and that doing the wealth-based affirmative action would also see diversification in universities and other public institutions. Therefore, I believe that my method, while surprisingly similar to my opponent's, would that banning affirmative action as it stands would be effective.
Okay, thank you. Was that time? 1:55, good. Okay, Chair now recognizes the Leader of the Opposition for a rebuttal not to exceed 2 minutes in length.
Thank you. So first, my opponent said that it should be a wealth-based standards by the institutions that accept students in colleges and whatnot. However, in saying that, my opposition is saying to accept students who don't academically qualify, and to not base admissions based on merit, but rather on needs. but higher education is to be pursued by those who qualify academically to achieve it, rather than those who simply cannot afford to pay for it. It might be those who qualify and may not be able to pay for it, but he does not define those two to be an inclusive factor, interchangeable. That's the first point, and therefore I disagree that instead of a wealth, this is a very subtle difference, but instead of a wealth-based affirmative action, it should be a class-based affirmative action where it recognizes the race, it recognizes people from minority groups as well as those who qualify academically. The second point I would like to disagree with my opponent is that although he did distinguish, he opposes a certain kind of affirmative action, my opponent is not saying that we should ban affirmative action. He's saying he disagrees with the strong affirmative action, however, does believe that there should be some kind of affirmative action that is in the realm of wealth, but still he is not saying that he would ban the affirmative action, and therefore I disagree with my opponent. That's it.
1 minute, 10 seconds.
10 seconds, okay. Well, thank you. Okay. All right, let's go. Let's see, who's, oh yeah, you seem to like to talk, okay. So, what'd you like?
Okay, I thought it was an interesting...
Start with your name.
Stephanie.
What's your name?
Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
I thought it was an interesting...
Can you guys sit closer together, please? Okay. That's better, yeah. Good, yeah.
Alright. I thought it was an interesting topic, especially because we all applied to school and we all thought about it. I think that I thought it was interesting that neither of them rejected or accepted the ban, and
Yeah.
I thought that it was
A curse on both houses, huh?
yeah. But I really enjoyed watching you guys, and I'm a nervous speaker, so I really appreciated that you guys were collected and calm. And I don't know, I never thought of basing it on socioeconomic.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's the latest and the greatest, at least from Harvard. How can they improve?
Hi, I'm Marissa.
Hi, Marissa.
I think you guys both did a good job. Maybe, Gabe, you could have... I understand the importance of setting up your point and defining everything, but I feel like that took a lot of time out of your solution and how you could have done that. And for Joe, I wish you could have been more direct in your speaking, a little bit more powerful, maybe do some more eye contact to emphasize your points, add more tonation when you're speaking, just to draw attention to yourself.
Yeah, those are good points. Okay, good. Well, Gabe and Cho, I won't call you Huyan Jun Kim. I'll call you Joe. Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. Okay. There was a movie. What was it? Black. Something about Black. Okay.
Joe Black?
Joe Black. Yeah, there we go. Gabe, this house would ban affirmative action. Right away, I was a little concerned when you didn't do it, but I realized that I don't know why you didn't do it, but you had a pretty good alternative and you had a pretty good case, despite the fact that you didn't do what the topic asked you to do. Okay, so that was interesting. I agree that you could have spent less time on your definitions. You were a minute 10 when you finished with those definitions. Woo! And you could have just said, hey, there's weak and strong affirmative action. I'm going to be defending the strong and not the weak, and so forth. And I'm going to do wealth-based and that sort of thing. So that was good. The problem, and I don't know how much mileage you're going to get out of it, but the problem is that it seems okay these days that whites are discriminated against. You know, that's acceptable. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, but you know, the people that are really getting screwed by affirmative actions are the Asians. If you really, I don't know how much you guys have looked into this, how deeply you got into this, but you know, there's secret little Asian quotas and all these other things to keep them out, because if they did it purely merit-based, these schools would look very different.
Right.
And that's fine with me, but it's not fine with a lot of these schools. So I would have liked to have seen more of that fleshed out as the problem compared to what you talked about. You talked about, under your slug line, how big is the problem. You talked about it being unconstitutional. And I'm looking more for quantitative, how big the problem, how many people are actually turned away. I'm looking for that under that. And the why we have the problem comes more with the structural inherency, the Constitution allowing it or not allowing it, could have come in that area of why we have the problem. Okay? So that's, I thought you had a misunderstanding of those two concepts. The solution of slowly phasing it in was desirable. It was anything that goes slow and not fast is good. You know, something that's radical, people are nervous about. You know, oh, what? And this is not a new idea. I'm sure you know that many scholars have talked about that really the people that are screwed the most are the poor.
Yeah.
And black, white, yellow, green, Asian, everybody, but it's the poor that are really excluded from these opportunities. So that was pretty good. You did an absolutely horrible job in allocating your time.
Oh, yeah.
And I fault you for that. Your cross-ex was good. Your refutation was good with the 4 points.
Thank you.
Joe, well, I agree with your colleague in the back of the house. You need to work on your delivery and being more assertive and more, have a more emphatic style of delivery. You two decided to spend some time on definitions. I just don't know exactly why, but you did, and so that was fine. When it came down to the time of you talking about what the problem is, it was interesting. You didn't read this quote, but you also talked about prisons in your brief, and I was intrigued by that. But your problem was when you get rid of affirmative action, the minority applications go down, at least at public institutions. And Gabe raised the point, did that continue over time, or do they just go away permanently, or is that a one-time thing? So, interesting point. As far as how big is the problem, you quoted the Harvard Law School Professor Ogletree, and that was fine. And you talked about them getting their benefits from going to the good schools, so that was good evidence. I like that. Your solution was, again, keep affirmative action. So that was your solution. So that was within the framework. Keep it in, amend it, don't end it is this clever way that Clinton talked about it when he was ever asked about it. He says, I want to amend it, not end it. I just want to get rid of the bad parts of it but keep the good parts of it, And so on that level you were more topical or arguing within the framework of the resolution. You're pointing out that he didn't really ban it, came real late in the debate. But still, that was okay. So now we need to have your ballots. Do I have them? It's already separated. Good, thank you. Okay. It's already separated. This is wrong, okay. They're not separated right. Who separated these? Okay, I'll do it myself.
They're already reading, okay?
Okay. The decision was 7-5 in favor of the proposition of banning affirmative action, although technically we didn't ban it. We just
I banned it as it stands today.
we banned it as it stands today. We didn't change it. We amended it
And
something. But who hasn't spoken yet in class today? What did you like?
I like the.
Stand up for Jesus. Say your names.
Hi, my name's Ahmad.
Hi, Ahmad. Real loud, powerful speaking voice.
I like that Gabe at the beginning outlined that two wrongs don't make the right, and he kind of guided us in a direction that he wanted to take us in, and he was commanding and assertive in that sense. And
Right.
he had a more commanding voice throughout the debate.
Yeah, because down the road you're going to need affirmative action for whites who were discriminated against because in this period, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a never-ending cycle. You've been kind of quiet. How can they improve?
I can improve.
Start with your name.
Hi, my name's Hussein.
Hi, Hossein.
Well, I thought it was kind of tough because it wasn't as oppositional as a typical debate. But I thought that was fair because if Gabe did go towards banning affirmative action, he'd really alienate his audience. So I think one thing you guys could work on is maybe working in advance and finding points, because in some ways you guys are just sort of agreeing with each other.
Yeah.
Well, in the class thing, those are really similar. So yeah, maybe.
Okay, two ships in the night. Did you trade briefs 24 hours ahead of time? No. What happened to that?
I plead the fifth.
I plead the fifth, I plead the sixth. Okay, good. All right, well, let's give them a nice round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay, well, it looks like our work is done. Thank you very much, everyone. Do I have... Oh, Lala, did everyone turn in their midterm? Oh, let me yell at some people. Let me see who it is. Okay, let's see. Celestine.
She's gonna turn it in later.
Like when?
I think she actually left to go get it now.
Oh, good. Ahmad.
I feel it printed.
Okay, she's in the hospital. Okay. Nicole.
Yes. I'm.
Okay, no, I know about you. Okay, yes. Joe.
Yeah, I have it.
What do you mean you have it?
He's turning it in right now.
Okay, can you give it to Lala, please? Shireen. I didn't give it back to you. So I have it still. And Jaspreet.
I have an intern, but for the final I have to talk to you.
Did you? But you didn't give her the midterm.
Is it just that you need to record it?
No, someone made an accusation that there was cheating going on, and I don't believe it, but I have to be fair and look and see if there was copy.
Well then, promise.
Yeah, drama. Yeah, so someone said that someone copied their paper verbatim. I didn't see it. I have a pretty good eye for this, but time will tell. Did you give it to her?
Have a parent one.
What? Oh, man.
Life gets tough, just have a parent.